All right, folks, welcome back to 3Zen. Now I'm going to begin the contact phase, and we're going to start off with the flight briefing. This was the first event that the students had, whether they report to the Flightline on early week or late week. So we're going to take 0500 as our report time, and that would back the IP's report time up to 4:45, about 15 minutes prior. So the IPs come into the flight commander's office, and we all sit around and talk about how the class is progressing, how we're doing with the timeline, what the weather's like, if any students having a problem, what do we want to do about it, how do we want to handle it, and so forth. 2 minutes prior to the actual report time, the students will knock on the door, which is our cue, but it's our 2-minute warning. So from there, we would get up, file into the room, and each IP would muster over to his desk. I use his because we were all hisers in those days. We didn't have any hers. So we go over to our desk, and the students would stand up, render a salute, and the IP would return the salute, and then I would begin the briefing as the flight commander with something like, all right, gentlemen, in 10 seconds, it's going to be 0500. And then it would be ready, hack. That usually worked pretty well unless you had a former navigator as a flight commander, then things could get a little dicey. Sometimes those guys would flash back to their navigator days, and you'd hear something like, in 10 seconds it will be 0500, ready, hack. Now, oh good Lord, you can't catch up. Anyway, I digress. So we'd have the time hack. We'd start out with the weather briefing, give everybody insight into what cloud cover and winds they're going to be dealing with that day, and then move on to status. Status is what status are we going to be flying with? Unrestricted, dual only, pattern only. They probably had about 4 or 5 statuses that we could operate under. And then we would move on to the ops notes. Now, when I had a new class within the first day or two, what I like to do is walk over to the briefing board, and they had all this information up there on the briefing board. I'd take a clipboard and I'd cover up the winds. And I'd look out into the class and I'd say, Lieutenant Stemler. That's actually the kid I did it to. He'd stand up and he'd say, yes, sir. I'd say, what are the winds today? And typically you'd see both their eyes go 12 o'clock position and 2 off flags drop down. Sir, I'm not sure. And I'd take the clipboard and toss it on the podium. I said, sit down, Stemmer. I said, if you're not paying attention to me briefing up here, I said, what's the point? I said, I have some things I need to tell you for a safe and efficient operation. So I said, I don't know what it's going to take for you, but I would offer that you start paying attention or you're probably not going to make it through this program. Just had to do it to one kid in each class, never had a problem. Anyway, I did have a hiccup once. During one of the early on briefings, Lieutenant Hampton yawned. Oh, good God. So I looked over at him. I said, Lieutenant Hampton, I said, if you're bored with what I'm telling you up here, I said, maybe you could slip into the flight commander's office and take a nap or something, or do whatever it is to get yourself back up to speed. Oh, no, sir, I'm not bored. I'm not bored, sir. He says, I heard everything you're saying. So we went on. Later on, found out that that class had just come over from Tweets, and he had flown the day before in a T-37, and he was still trying to clear his ears because the aircraft was an unpressurized aircraft, and he still had some things going on in his ears that he was trying to get rid of. Oh, God, I felt bad about that one. And I did apologize to him, but that was a couple months later. Anyway, coming back to the flight room, we once we got through the weather briefing, the status, we moved on to the ops notes or the church notes. And those were usually things that were going to affect our flying operation in one way or the other. And again, things that we needed to know, again, for a safe operation. Once we get through the ops notes, we moved on to stand-up stand. Now, here's where our standardization officer would come up to the podium and he would deliver an emergency procedure. So he'd call on a student. Student would stand up and he'd say, okay, he says, you're just on takeoff leg and you get a firelight. And the kid would go through the boldface, the memory items, and then he would go through the cleanup items, if you will, bringing the airplane back around to land. If they screwed it up, they were just told to sit down and they'd call on another student. And we once had a morning where we went through 8 students before we found a kid that got it right. And that was brutal because if you're told to sit down, you're not flying that day. It happened. So, but generally it went very, very smooth. But there were those days. And old Kirshner, who was Mike Kirshner was our scheduling officer. He's back there. These name tags had magnets on them. They went up on the scheduling board. So as each kid would screw it up, Kirshner would pull his name tag off and flip it over his shoulder. We had a pile of 8 name tags on the floor once we got done that morning. Anyway, from stand-up stand, we would, on other days, we would run safety briefings. Now, standardization would run 2 days a week, flight safety would run 2 days a week, and ground safety was on Friday. We did that because the kids were going to be turned loose on Friday afternoon. So we wanted ground safety to kind of be in the forefront of their minds as they went off town, went off base, set their hair on fire, and did whatever students do. So anyway, we'd talk about flight safety, usually accident briefs or something germane to the flying operation that we had going on at the time. Yeah, we'd brief if there was a T-38 or T-37 accident. We had to brief those and kind of talk about what transpired and so forth. But once we got through the morning briefing, we opened it up for any questions or comments. Usually there weren't any, and then we would conclude the briefing and then break up to individual flight briefings. And that's where I'll pick it up in the next of this series. So thanks for stopping by, and we'll get airborne here pretty quick.